What if the most important thing about Star Atlas is not what it is yet? What if the real story is the shape of what it is trying to become? Because right now, if you drop into Star Atlas and only look at what exists today, you will see something very specific. You will see fragments, a first playable version of space exploration, faction-based combat, custom PvP and PvE matches, dedicated multiplayer servers, a live browser economy, governance systems already operating through proposals and voting, ships, progression paths, rewards, and the first real bridges between gameplay and economies. That is real, but it is also incomplete. And that contrast is the entire point. Because Star Atlas does not present its future like most games do. Most roadmaps promise more content, more mission, more maps, more classes, more features. The Star Atlas roadmap does something stranger. It starts with a playable foundation, then slowly expands into a world, then a shared world, then a physical world, then a structured society, then a contested economy, then a high-risk universe, then a war machine, then a recovery system, and finally a player-governed civilization. That is not a normal progression. That is not a normal game roadmap. And whether Star Atlas ever reaches all of it is one question. But what it is aiming at is another. Because if you follow this roadmap carefully, step by step, it stops looking like a plan for a game, and starts looking like a blueprint for a digital civilization. That is the vision. And the only way to really understand that vision is to move through it the same way the roadmap does. From what exists now, to what comes next, to what this is all trying to become. So let's begin. Where Star Atlas begins, not with the dream, with the foundation. Preseason. The roadmap is very deliberate about Preseason. It does not describe it as early access content. It describes it as the system's foundation layer of Star Atlas. That wording matters, because Preseason is not trying to convince you that the final universe is already here. It is trying to answer a simpler question first. Can this actually work? Can players move through space? Can they fight? Can they progress? Can multiplayer infrastructure hold? Can gameplay connect to the on-chain economy? Can ships, rewards, and systems begin talking to each other? That is what Preseason is really solving. Project Galia is one of the clearest examples. The roadmap describes it as the first playable version of space exploration. Free navigation, encounters in space, an early exploration loop built around the unknown. Even a subwarp mechanic. That is not the full universe, but it is the first glimpse of an actual game world, not just an arena. Then there is combat. PvP and PvE are still in progress, but custom matches already exist through Surge, Team Deathmatch, and Deathmatch, with private lobbies enabled. And Surge matters in particular, because Surge is already complete as a faction-based combat mode. Oni, Mud, Uster, kill players, turn in points, compete for faction victory, rewards scaled by participation. That is not full faction warfare, but it is the first working prototype of it. Even the arena maps tell the same story. Gateway, Paizo's Arena, they are not just new spaces. They are proof that environment design is catching up to gameplay systems. And then comes dogfighting, co-op PvE, which is important not only because of the mode itself. The roadmap says the real focus is multiplayer vehicle sync. That means this feature is doing something deeper than adding content. It is testing whether ships can function in multiplayer at the scale Star Atlas eventually wants. And that brings us to one of the most important milestones in the whole roadmap: dedicated multiplayer servers. That may sound technical, but it is one of the most consequential lines in the document. Peer-to-peer gets replaced, stability improved, scalability improves, reliable sessions become possible. Without that, the MMO dream is just a dream. But here is where Preseason becomes more than a collection of tests. Because the roadmap is not only building gameplay, it is building connection. Fleet Command appears as the bridge between strategy and action. The future RTS view is foreshadowed. Ship customization begins. The loadout workbench begins. Emotes and pets begin building identity. Ship mastery, weapon mastery, and ability mastery begin attaching progression to actual use. And then the roadmap introduces one of the most important ideas. UE5 to Sage rewards integration. A resource like ink can be earned in Unreal Engine 5, used in Sage, and traded on the market. That is the turning point, because that is where gameplay stops being only gameplay and starts becoming economic value. Now the fight, the rewards, the ship, and the economy begins to belong to the same system. That is the real meaning of Preseason. Messy by design, fragmented, experimental, incomplete. But incomplete because it is trying to solve something harder than content. A system where gameplay, progression, economy, and scale all connect. Preseason is not the game. It is the foundation that makes the game possible. If Preseason builds a machine, Season 0 gives that machine a world, a face, and a direction. This is the first real identity and persistence season. And the questions change. Where do you live? What career are you pursuing? What ship are you building around? Who are you inside this universe? The first answer is Aoki. An open world map, the home world of the Oyster, a place meant to be explored for its lore, environment, and culture. That matters because a universe does not become convincing when it only has more mechanics. It becomes convincing when it has somewhere you can recognize, somewhere that feels inhabited. The same shift appears in real estate, commercial plots, residential plots, utility attached to actual location like Aoki and the Oni Central Space Station. That is one of the first moments where Star Atlas stops talking only about activity and starts talking about habitation. Not just where you go, where you belong. Then comes character creation. This is where the player begins to stop feeling like a wallet attached to ships and systems. Now you have an avatar tied to your account. Species determined by your permanent faction. Customization across cosmetics, body, gender, and species framework. An identity that can be even decoupled and turned into a tradable NFT. That is Star Atlas trying to merge MMO persistence with tradable asset logic. And it deepens through racer tiers. Progression becomes visible. The world can read your path, not just you. Then, the Puna brace arrives in UE5. Unique animation, customization, lore embodied instead of only described. This is how species stop being wiki entries and starts becoming playable life forms inside the world. Because Season 0 does something even more important. It gives players lives to choose, careers, not one universal ladder, different ladders. The racing career, the fighter career, narrative-driven missions, license progression, career-specific mechanics, rewards through the LP store. That is a very strong design decision. It means the universe is not asking everyone to become the same kind of player. It is asking players to choose roles. Even racing changes shape here. Combat racing blends PvP and PC competition, progression rewards, Atlas rewards, ship progression, and racing career progression. And new racetracks across the Galia expanse, including Aoki, help turning racing from a side mode into a real pillar. Then comes one of the most important Season 0 features, the shipyard module. Purchasing ships, spawning ships, skins, crew management, component installation, refueling, refeeding. That is not just a menu. It is the first real operations hub for ship ownership. And from there, ownership deepens. On-chain ship configuration, means performance choices become part of a persistent system. Sheepskin crafting turns visual identity into a crafted, tradable market. So now ownership is more than possession. It becomes maintenance, configuration, expression, economy. Then the stage side starts changing too. Distress signaling, cargo transfer, refueling, repair, rescue. This is where Star Atlas begins moving away from solo optimization and towards dependence. Now players need other players. For fuel, for repair, for rescue, for support. That is how a world starts producing stories. If Preseason asks, can Star Atlas work? Season 0 asks, can Star Atlas start feeling alive? If Season 0 makes Star Atlas feel inhabited, Season 1 makes it feel shared. This is the first major expansion of social and cooperative play. The first big move is mining. Space Miner becomes a full career path. Narrative-driven progression, career-specific mechanics, license leveling, rewards. That matters because Star Atlas is no longer only saying, go fight. It's saying, choose how you contribute. Then ships themselves change meaning. Crew station modules let multiple players collaborate aboard the same ship. Shared activities, temporary control over specific systems, distributed responsibilities. This is one of the most important transitions in the roadmap, because it changes the ship fantasy from one player owning one vehicle to ships as shared platforms. The roadmap deepens that again through crew NPC conversations. Crew are not meant to feel like stat cards. They are meant to feel like characters with presence. Choices affect their lives, relationships become more meaningful. Narrative continuity starts living inside the ship itself. Then, the universe gets one of its clearest signs of civilization, the Oni Central Space Station, an explorable faction hub, quarters tied to different Oni species, residential plots, commercial plots. That matters because faction identity stops being abstract. You do not just read about Oni, you move through Oni. And then there is the tram system. A detail that sounds small until you realize what it implies. The station is not just big in the lore. It is large enough in gameplay space to need internal transportation. That is how scale becomes believable. Project Space Hubs extends that same idea outward. The low-risk zone starts feeling less like an empty transit space and more like lived-in space in orbit. Because Season 1 is not only about social depth, it is also where Star Atlas starts thinking like a platform, introducing the Meta Holodeck, a spatial mode on the title screen and in select in-world locations. Players can travel to other metaverses. Experiences can be created by other players in Unreal Engine. Wallet connection is already integrated. Star Atlas branded NFTs can be used through the game API. That is one of the boldest ideas in the roadmap, because at that point, Star Atlas is no longer acting only like a game. It is acting like a framework, a gateway, a universe other experiences can plug into. The Sage side deepens too. Random events, new PvE enemies, more ship customization, more crafting, more map expansion, more tactical combat depth. All of it points towards the same broader effect. Density. If Season 0 makes Star Atlas feel alive, Season 1 makes it feel shared. Up to this point, most of Star Atlas still revolves around ships, system, and economy. Season 2 changes that. This is the first true human-scale expansion, and the question becomes simple. What does it feel like to physically exist inside this universe? Game hunting enters as a carrier, and that matters not only because it expands progression, it changes the tone of the world. Mining is extraction, hunting is interaction, tracking, survival, exploration, environmental contact. The universe starts feeling less purely industrial and more ecological. Then comes one of the biggest turning points in the roadmap: character-to-character combat, FPS weapons, a gold standard ambition for direct conflict at the player level. That changes the pace of the whole universe. Ship combat is scale, positioning, space, FPS combat is proximity, reflex, human tension. It opens the door to environments where ships cannot solve the problem for you. Jetpacks deepen that again. Longer boosts, faster movement, hand boosters, customizable thrusters, crafting integration. Mobility becomes part of build identity, part of traversal, part of combat, part of the economy. Then, creature mounting arrives. Tame creatures, ride creatures, traverse the landscape in a non-mechanical way. That is a major tonal shift, because it introduces organic life as gameplay. Not just ships, not just machinery, not just extraction. Living environments. If Season 1 makes the world feel shared, Season 2 makes it feel physical. Once the universe feels physical, the next question is no longer what you can do. It is what systems you belong to. Season 3 is where Star Atlas begins turning from a world into a society. Bounty hunting enters as a specialized career. Tracking, pursuit, enforcement, targeted objectives. That matters because conflict starts tying itself to order, not just combat modes. The Oster Central Space Station continues the transformation of factions into lived spaces. Now, faction identity is not just lore. It is architecture, atmosphere, daily life. Mission systems begin structuring player activity more clearly. Faction and manufacturer reputation begin defining how the world responds to you. That is a major psychological shift. Now the world remembers. Now your actions start affecting access, trust, and alignment. Then the economy matures. Research and crafting progression push production into specialization. The license system widens. Freight, repair, salvage, tow. These are the signs of a real interdependent universe. Not glamorous roles, essential roles. And then comes one of the defining features of the entire roadmap. Faction decentralized autonomous organizations. Players lock police, submit proposals, vote on taxation, diplomacy, objectives, laws, and fund allocation. This is not governance as background lore. This is governance as gameplay structure. And access badges and permits reinforce that by adding control, restriction, and hierarchy. Some players go everywhere, some do not. That is structure. If Season 2 makes the universe physical, Season 3 makes it organized. Season 4 is where Star Atlas begins to feel like a contested economic map. The freighter carrier formalizes logistics. The smuggler carrier introduces shadow economy, evasion, and disruption. And then, infrastructure changes hands. Player-built space stations are one of the biggest shifts in Season 4. That changes where trade happens, where services are offered, where players gather, where control starts to matter. World events make the universe dynamic. Combat expands directly into space stations and land claims. Jump points reshape movement across the galaxy. And once travel routes start mattering, strategy changes. Because choke points create value, and value creates conflict. Then one of the most important economic transitions arrives. Localized station services in markets. This is where geography turns into economy. Now distance matters, trade routes matter, price differences matter, strategic movement matters. Space stops being a backdrop and starts being a logistical reality. Then governance gets more local. Regional and sectoral DAOs bring politics closer to the player, and the bounty hunting loop becomes fully systemic through tracking and enforcement. All of this adds up to one clear shift. Season 4 is where Star Atlas stops feeling like a set of systems and starts feeling like a network of trade, infrastructure, and power. Season 5 is where Star Atlas crosses into real pressure. Land mining extends extraction onto planets. Manufacturing becomes one of the central industrial carriers in the roadmap. And the Mud Central Space Station completes the physical triangle of the major factions. Ground-to-ship and ship-to-ground combat complete warfare across environments. And then comes one of the defining systems of this season. the high-risk zone. Permanent ship burn, no recovery, the rarest resources and the greatest rewards. That changes the emotional logic of the universe. Now, loss can be real. Not theoretical, real. Then this pressure widens. Stealth and scanning mechanics introduce information warfare. Megastructures introduce collective ambition at huge scale. Raids and bosses create endgame PvE. Ship crafting completes the production chain. Mine resources, process materials, manufacture components, build ships. This is a big transition. Ships stop being only purchased assets. They become products of the in-game economy. Then, the universe pushes outward. Deep space exploration beyond known space, procedural regions, and even terraforming. At that point, players are no longer only using the world, they are changing it. This is where Star Atlas stops feeling like a world you simply inhabit, and starts feeling like a world you pressure, reshape, defend, and risk everything inside of. Season 6 is where Star Atlas makes its biggest leap in ambition. The high-risk zone becomes fully integrated into Unreal Engine 5. Risk is no longer just systemic, it becomes immediate. In this season, all species receive their homeworlds. The galaxy's cultural geography becomes complete. Then, the platform vision widens through the meta-warp drive. Player-created content, other games, and connected external experiences. Star Atlas is no longer acting only like a game world. It is acting like a hub. That's when the command layer arrives. Galaxy Commander introduces the tools needed to control large fleets and multi-ship operations in Unreal Engine. Because once the scale grows, command has to grow with it. Territory conquest turns warfare into permanent strategic change. Fleet battles bring massive conflict into focus. Now battles do not just create spectacle, they change control. And then comes what may be the clearest expression of the Star Atlas vision, the RTS to FPS toggle. The ability to shift between macro strategy and direct control, between commander and participant, between overseeing fleets and stepping into the action. That is more than a simple feature. That is the central fusion. Not just many systems in one game, many scales in one universe. Alongside all of that, data runner and transport carriers complete another important idea. The idea that movement, information, and logistics matters. In a civilization scale system, not all value is firepower. By this point, the roadmap already contains territory shifts, permanent loss, and massive fleet conflict. Season 7 asks a question most war-driven games never do. What happens after destruction? Repair becomes a full career, not a side utility, a real profession. That matters because in a universe built around risk and warfare, repair is not optional, it's infrastructure. Salvage becomes the counterpart to destruction. Wreckage, abandoned assets, recoverable value. Now, war stops being only loss, it becomes part of a recycling economy. Then all ships reach gold standard, fully modeled, fully explorable, and fully functional. That is more than a content update, it is a milestone of completeness. Finally then, the Pirate's Den introduces a major outlaw ecosystem in the medium risk zone. Unique goods, unique services, and relationship-gated access. Which matter because it complicates the universe. It makes it messier, more realistic, and less cleanly divided. If Season 6 was about conquest, Season 7 is about continuity. And then, the roadmap reaches its farthest point. Season 8. This is not just another expansion, it is a transfer of ownership. Project Metaverse Standards transitions control to the Star Atlas DAO. Open source, community-led, governance, development, and updates moving into the hands of the players. That is the most radical idea in this entire roadmap. Not just building a world for players, handing the world over to them. Then, Iris and the Cataclysm becomes the deepest endgame region. A rogue planet, reality-defying environments, extreme encounters, the rarest resources, and the deepest lore secrets. Harder content at the edge of the universe. The Cradle, the Council of Peace station, becomes the political center. The richest and most powerful station in the galaxy. a focal point for diplomacy, faction relationships, quests, and influence. And the final career ecosystem closes through rescue, refueling, and politician roles. The last one is the perfect ending to this entire roadmap, because once politician becomes a playable role, the vision is complete. Power itself becomes gameplay. When you zoom all the way out, the arc becomes very clear. Preseason is foundation. Season 0 is identity. Season 1 is shared social space. Season 2, embodiment. Season 3 is structure and governance. Season 4, economy and territory. Season 5 is scale, industry, and risk. Season 6 is warfare and command. Season 7 is sustainability and recovery. And finally, Season 8, sovereignty. That is not the arc of a normal content roadmap. That is the arc of a world trying to become a civilization. Now the honest balance matters. Not everything in this roadmap is live. Not everything is finished. Many systems are still in progress. The later seasons are clearly long-range ambition. But that does not weaken the roadmap. It clarifies how to read it. The value here is not pretending the final universe already exists. The value is seeing how the roadmap connects what exists now to what comes later. Today, Star Atlas already offers something tangible: playable exploration foundations, combat prototypes, dedicated multiplayer servers, a live stage economy layer, governance systems, the first real connections between gameplay and economy. Near term, the roadmap wants to turn that into a world of places, identities, professions, multi-crew ships, missions, faction hubs, and social interdependence. Long-term, it pushes much further, with localized markets, player-built infrastructure, permanent loss, industrial production, territorial control, deep space, terraforming, fleet command, macro-to-micro gameplay, recovery systems, political roles, and eventually player sovereignty over the universe itself. That is the vision. Not a bigger map, not just more features, a layered digital society built over time. And that may be the clearest way to say it. Star Atlas is not trying to arrive all at once. It is trying to become something larger, one connected layer at a time. From playable systems, to a living world, to a shared economy, to a governed society, to a player-owned civilization. And by the end of its own roadmap, the thing Star Atlas is trying to become does not read like just another game. It reads like a civilization in blueprint form.